Hello and welcome to the Data Plus Design for Development Showcase and Workshop Session 2025. It is so wonderful that you could be with us today for this exciting occasion while we celebrate the 2025 cohort of the Data Plus Design for Development program here at the Leaders of Africa Institute. My name is Professor Peter Pinar. I am the Executive Director of the Leaders of Africa Institute. Today, I am joined by my co-host for the showcase and workshop session. That is Ms. Eva Tete, who is the lead for the Data Plus Design for Development program, and Mr. Henry Dua, who is also one of the co-leads for the Data Plus Design for Development program. Together, we are all excited to celebrate our scholars here in the Data Plus Design for Development program and their accomplishments to bring social impact in the spaces that they're working by using the key form of data visualization as a part of that process. And as we begin today's sessions, we invite you to learn more about the Leaders of Africa Institute and the Data Plus Design for Development program as we begin today's session. And that's where I'm going to begin. The Leaders of Africa Institute is an institute that has programs that bring together scholars from across the globe, from the North American continent to Europe, to the African continent, of course, and in Asia and South Asia as well. And scholars come to the Institute to study in programs because they're concerned about some of the challenges that we face today and believe that research and that data and that well-timed analysis can really advance the key solutions to the many challenges we face, including some of the challenges you see on your screen at present. Now, the Leaders of Africa and the Leaders of Africa Institute mobilizes the power of rigorous inquiry and creative expression to advance equity, justice, and selfless leadership in Africa. We facilitate a Pan-African community for collaboration that cultivates impactful, translatable research, amplifies diverse perspectives, and leverages creative audiovisual, graphic, and technological design. Now, today, in terms of the mission of the Leaders of Africa Institute, we're going to be focusing on a couple of different areas, particularly translatable research, as you're going to see come across in the presentations you will hear, as well as graphic and technological design. As you're going to see in today's session, many of the pieces that are going to be shared today bring together both the data side and the research side, as well as the technological and graphic design side of the picture. And so this is the mission of the Leaders of Africa Institute, and we're so overjoyed to have scholars from across the world, including our scholars here at the Data and Design program. Now, when we think about data and design, we think oftentimes of data, and there is data in the middle where there are inputs to data, as we know, and there are outputs of data. The inputs of data are whether we can actually access the data. As you may hear in today's showcase, many of our scholars spent a lot of time and energy being able to get access to the data that they will use in these capstone projects and discuss. Now, a lot of data has been becoming increasingly available with the open data movement that seeks to bring a transparency around data that's being collected by international organizations, countries, and other entities. But there's a long way to go. And so oftentimes it takes a lot of energy to just get the data that we need to be able to do the research and the data visualization work that we want to do. And you're going to hear about that in today's showcase. But we can also focus on the outputs of data. What do we do with data once we have it? And one of the things that we do with data once we have it is we visualize it, we communicate it, we tell stories with it. And the importance of doing so is because we have to address some concerns that some folks might have with the research community and how we are using our research, such as, does anyone even read or act on our research? And do we actually communicate our research to the audiences that we want to reach, particularly audiences that have lower levels of statistical literacy that we might have as researchers and professionals in different fields and research fields? In addition to that, we might ask the question, are we actually producing knowledge that results in social impact? One of the benefits of data visualization is the ability to tell stories, is the ability to translate information with the hopes that it will have and spur social impact or social innovation or raise awareness. And so you're going to see in today's showcase, many of these projects are doing just that. They're bringing about social impact by communicating the numbers effectively in the information effectively so that our audience can act on that, or we can act on it ourselves to bring about the social impact and the change that we would like to see in this world. Now let me bring you to our present 2025 Data and Design Scholars. Our Data and Design Scholars were selected through a competitive application process that happened in January, February, and March of this year. And they were selected in 50 in number for this year's cohort. And they represent 20 countries and even more in this cohort. They are experts in public health, international development, sustainability, and business, and many other themes which you're going to see in today's showcase. And with that, I now want to pass it over to Eva, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Data and Design program so that we understand the context in which these projects that we're going to see were created. Over to you, Miss Eva.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. We are glad to have you here. So I'll talk a little bit about the structure of the Data Plus Design program. So the Data Plus Design program is a 3-month program beginning in March of every year, and we meet on weekly basis for about 3 hours. In the class, what we do is that we go through series of courses and also topic pertaining to data. As you can see on the screen, we start to think critically about data in development, which has to do with how do we use data to talk about developmental issues in our community, and how do we derive insight from this data to affect policy change. And these are some of the things that you're going to see here in the presentation today. In addition to that, we don't just use the data to produce insight. We also think critically about the design and the elements of the data in terms of what design will go with what data. You are thinking about the color patterns and things and other things that are really critical to help with the projection of the charts and also the visualization that scholars are going to produce. So in addition to that, we use different platforms in this course, from Datawrapper to Power BI. The reason why we have different platforms is that we want scholars to be able to be familiar with each and every of these different platforms, from Datawrapper, from Tableau, and at the end of the day, during like their own capstone, they will use the platform that they are most familiar or comfortable with to do their final project. So as you can see in today's presentation, scholars have used different platforms from Datawrapper to Tableau to Power BI. In addition to the projects that are going to be presented today, in the Data Plus Design program, our scholars complete mini assignments. They also share this assignment in their data notebook, which helps them to track in terms of their progress, the assignment that they are doing, and everything, and also to help us to see where they are in terms of their improvement and come in and also comment on some of the good work that they are doing. So an example that you can see on your screen is a data notebook by Akosia Kosa. As you could see, she's used Datawrapper, Power BI, and also Tableau to showcase different visualization that she did, which is really good. At the end of the day, Akosia has access to this notebook that she can download and have it in her own stuff, so that she'll be able to go back and reflect on it to see areas that she needs to improve. So in the course of this section, as you hear from our scholars, we also want to hear from you, our audience. So we want to get insight from you. We want to know how well you know data visualization. So there's going to be a short quiz of 4 questions through Zoom, which will appear as you can see on your screen. Take your time to answer these questions for us, and we will review them in the course of the presentations. As you are doing this, in addition to this, if you are interested in the Data Plus Design program, a link will be shared in your Zoom chat where you'll be able to fill an interest form. So when you fill the interest form, and the Data Plus Design application, call for application will go out somewhere in November, you'll be the first to know about it. So I'll hand it over to Peter to continue to the next section.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll remind you, if you're interested in applying for next year's cohort of the Data Plus Design for Development program, the applications usually open at the end of November, so in just under a month's time. So if you fill out that interest form, you'll get a special email when applications open inviting you to apply. So those links are shared in the chat. But as Miss Eva mentioned, we've got a data visualization quiz coming in. We want to test a little bit of your knowledge and thought process about data visualization. So take some time to fill that out. And while you're filling that out on your screen, I'm going to talk about today's format for today's session. And so let's talk about that. Each data and design scholar will make a 4-minute presentation, and we have 12 presentations for you today. Now those presentations are going to take place. They're going to see some dots on your screen. A green light means there's time remaining, a yellow light means there's 1 minute left, and a red means that time is up, and then you'll hear a nice pleasant chime that will play when it's time to wrap up and finish. In addition to that, we invite you as the audience to share your comments, share your questions in the chat. The authors of the data visualization projects are really enthusiastic to connect with you as part of the audience, and we invite you to share your comments and questions. They will be able to answer those and engage with you after their presentation is completed. In addition to that, we have awards that will be given out at the end of today's showcase. They include the Best Visualization Award for overall Best Visualization Project, the Public Policy Impact Award for the Advocacy Project with Extensive Policy Analysis and Impact, the Data and Design Award for Best Design Features and UI UX, the Social Impact Award project, which most likely will spur intervention and development, and the Research Award for the Best Project with Clear Implications for Research, the Activism Award for Best Project that Raises Awareness and Promotes Action, and the Audience Choice Award. The Audience Choice Award will be an award that will be given out by you, the audience. You'll have a chance to vote in a Zoom poll for the Audience Choice Award winner. So I want you to pay attention to the visualizations that most speak to you. And they're going to be different ones that speak to each one of us. We're going to give an award to those that had the majority of today's audience in their support. Now, in addition to the presentations, every fourth presentation, there will be a mini lesson. The first mini lesson will be using one of those platforms, will be led by Miss Eva, focusing on the platform Datawrapper. And the second mini lesson will be from Mr. Henry, who's going to talk to us about how we think about the design features and planning the design features for visualization. And by the time we get to that session, part of the session today, you'll have seen some of these design features really at work in the projects that will be presented. And so that's where we're going today. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Eva, who's going to get us started with our first visualization presentation, which will come from Bijou. So Bijou, be prepared. You are up first. So over to you, Eva, to get us started.
Thank you. So our first presenter is Bijou Atequist. She's going to present on the big picture of Ghana's tourism. And as you are aware, Ghana has been embarking on a tourism project called the Year of Return. They started with the Year of Return, inviting people from the diaspora to come to Ghana and to explore Ghana and also have a connection with where the ancestors came through. So Bijou is going to give us a good highlight of some of the initiative that has been taking place and also how the tourism industry is booming. She's going to give us a good assessment, as you will see in her presentation. So Bijou, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Eva. Thank you, Prof. Peter. So what do fresh coconut water, a door of no return, and a strong diasporan community have in common? They're all vibrant pieces of Ghana's tourism story, representing her history, her growth, and her future. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bijou Atequist. I am a communications professional working in international development, and I am passionate about good food, storytelling, and responsible adventures. As Ms. Eva shared, the goal of my Capstone project was in exploring Ghana's tourism sector through data and design, was to understand how the sector is growing and how it can be made more sustainable, inclusive, and locally beneficial. For my Capstone project, I worked with national tourism data covering the years from 1994 to 2024. I focused on trends in tourist arrivals, economic contributions and employment, and site level activity. So our story is going to unfold across several dashboards. The overview, which you see on the screen, presents a snapshot of Ghana's tourism growth, showing that international arrivals have increased generally over the past decade, and they've even been holding strong during challenging periods like the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And you can even find the countries which contributed the highest number of arrivals, as well as the annual number of arrivals. And then we move on to the economic impact dashboard, which explores how tourism supports the economy. So I looked at how much tourists spend, as well as the job creation and tourism's contribution to Ghana's GDP. Now, while that is being pulled up, I will say that there was significant growth in the economic sector. Yeah, exactly. So we looked at tourist spending, we looked at job creation, and as you can see, there was significant job growth. However, while there was growth and while there was significant contribution to Ghana's GDP, it also raised quite a few questions, including what kind of jobs are being created, who is being hired, and who benefits the most from local businesses or foreign investors. And then finally, we look at the last dashboard. And in this one, we explore the visitor demographics and the behaviors. This part was particularly interesting to me because it allowed me to dive into who's visiting Ghana, why they're visiting, and where specifically in Ghana they went. Now, you'll notice that in terms of the site popularity, the purpose for visiting as well, there was a steady rise in leisure activities and cultural tourism, and most activity was centered around the southern regions, especially at government-managed sites. Overall, this dashboard highlights the need for a balance between economic growth and ethical tourism, right? And my purpose was to encourage reflection on how Ghana can continue to welcome visitors while preserving its culture, its environment, and its local livelihoods. So some of the key takeaways that I made mention of in this particular dashboard is that there is a positive story. Tourism in Ghana is growing steadily and showing resilience, but this also reminds us that growth alone isn't enough. We need to look at sustainability, inclusion, and local participation. All those must remain at the center. So some of the things I would recommend are partnering with local influencers, launching an Explore Ghana campaign, and collaborating on year-round cultural ecotourism events with traditional councils. In short, this dashboard isn't just about the numbers, it's about the insights and the stories that the data is telling us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bu. That was so insightful. And this is really great, a very good, insightful perspective on like Ghana's tourism. And I hope that if there's any policy, anyone in the policy world here, connect with Bijou and learn more about it and see how we can use her data and insight to influence politicians to do more for the Ghana tourism industry, because there's still more to be done. Having people come in December and other time is not enough to sustain the industry. So more needs to be done, and Bijou has thrown a very good light on that. So thank you so much, Bijou.
And I will say one other thing about Bijou's project. It took a lot of energy to get some of the data that has been seen. As I mentioned in the introductory remarks, that not all data is easily accessible on a website to be able to be downloaded and brought into your data visualization platform. She spent a lot of time and energy interacting with some of the key governmental stakeholders in the tourism space. And there are several different actors in that space. And so we commend you, Bijou, on a really good job bringing that data together. Congratulations. Back to you, Eva.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our next speaker. So I'm going to invite Sandra Bennyworth. Sandra will talk about property tax, and her topic is property tax. Can African countries benefit from it? And this is really an important topic because tax collection is a very big challenge on our continent. And she's going to talk about how African countries can actually leverage property tax to finance development project. So, Sandra, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Sandra Wanirat, and I am an analyst with Riponami. And the title of my visualization is African countries. Property tax, can African countries benefit from it? So with a focus on Banjul and Kanifing, which are states in the Gambia. So property remains one of the most remains one of the most challenging areas that we, especially Africans, don't want to talk about. But we can see that with the recent changes, especially in the decline of the foreign aid that we have been receiving from the different countries like the USA, we see that us, the Africans, have to now find a way we can tap into our countries in order to increase our revenue and be able to finance the different sectors of our countries, like the finance sectors, like the health sectors. So that's why I came up with this, so that we Africans can see one of the most untapped potential that is in property tax. Unlike other types of taxes, property tax is one that is applied on fixed assets and is not subjected to changes or fluctuations. So it makes it more reliable for us to be able to tap into. So I chose Gambia because it's a very small country, but with an increased rate in urbanization, as we can see. And then I chose the areas of Banjul and Kanefing because they are the main areas or the cities where we see a lot of rental activities taking place. So in our visualization, this data, all the data is able to get, I want to remind that actually this is not all the buildings that are out there, but this is just available data for us to be able to use and to see the potential we can get from property tax. In our visualization here, we see that the total number of buildings obtained were 34K, and the number of settlements were 20. And in these, we can see we also have top 5 settlements in the different different regions that are available. So this will be able to help the government be able to focus on the areas with the highest tax, and then the bottom 5 are areas where the government shouldn't put a lot of focus on. So when we look at the distribution of the buildings, we see that residential buildings are the most common buildings that are available, especially with the increase in the real estate activities in the Gambia and also in other countries in Africa. As I'm talking about this, I want you to also reflect on your own country. So this visualization, all this part of the dashboard only shows us where the buildings are and which areas the government can focus on. But if we go to the next visualization, that helps us answer the question, how much can we be able to benefit from this? So with available data that we got, we're able to use the sum of the rental income. We see that over 700 million is obtained as an annual rental income. And if this 700 million, we apply, let me say, a 15% tax on on these revenues that are obtained, we have over 100 million that we can obtain as a as different countries, or as the Gambia can obtain. In order for this to happen, the government has to also know how, or the periods or the frequency of payment, how the government or how different businesses are paying their taxes. And also for them, on the table there, we see that different businesses where the government should put more emphasis on. So this, as we can see in this dashboard of visualization, it helps us see the untapped potential in rental income that would help us really as Africans be able to finance the different sectors like the health and education sectors, which have been more dependent on the foreign aid. So I would urge you, the Gambia and other countries, to be able to tap into this tax potential by investing in the different areas in technology, and for us as citizens, and to also be able to be willing to pay taxes. I, for one, am not a fan of paying taxes, but we need to work together in order for us to be independent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Indeed, that's one of the things that we hear is a lot of taxes on mobile money, taxes on transactions. A lot of these are consumption taxes. Then we have the income taxes. And it's really important that you've added here, Sandra, property tax, because a lot of people have their actual assets in properties, and many properties for that matter, particularly if you're connected with government or you come from a wealthy family. So you really raised this issue in this debate here with your visualization. Thank you so much. Eva?
Thank you so much, Sandra. This is so insightful. As Peter already has said, property tax is something that our leaders can leverage on to help with development projects on the continent. So I also move on to the next presentation, and I will invite Imbutidem Okome. She's going to present on family planning and teenage pregnancy in Nigeria. As you know, teenage pregnancy is a very, very serious challenge that is facing a lot of our young people. And she's going to throw a very good light on, in terms of like the trend, what is happening in Nigeria, and also how the use of family planning is being implemented to help teenagers prevent or reduce unwanted pregnancy. So I invite Imbutidem to present on her topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. So there's a saying back home, if you get to a place and there's no Nigeria and the place is not safe, because we acknowledge the fact that we are many. Yeah. And as at 2024, we had a population of over 200 million, and 70% of those were under the age of 30, 151 being young people, meaning that our dependent population is really swollen, and no country can sustain that. Teenage pregnancy, as we know, is a topic people do not discuss because of the social and cultural ideas behind it, but it's something that we need to pay attention to. It's something we need to pay attention to because it is actually a big deal for a population like ours in Nigeria. Please, can we move to the slides? Okay, so my dashboard is going to be looking at what the teenage pregnancy and family planning numbers look like, comparing the 2023 and 2018 values of the NDHS. From the slide, you would see the map of Nigeria showing the level of increase, or level of change rather, in the numbers. In most of the states, there was a change. The states that had the highest increase, or the top 5 states with increase in family planning use, are the ones in green shown on the right-hand side, while the states that had a significant drop in family planning use are those in orange. Across education, you'll see that there was significant change when you compare the 2023 and 2018 figures with an increase across board by education. By geopolitical zone, there was also an increase, and then by wealth quintile. This is important to note for us as Nigeria because recently we experienced a significant drop. Health professionals call it an erasure rather of family planning in the national health budget because it was as high as 98%. One will say this happened because we have started bringing in the numbers, but I don't know whether we should celebrate yet. So let's move on to the teenage pregnancy slide and see what that's saying. Okay, on the teenage pregnancy side, we can see a lot of orange, meaning that a lot of states actually experienced a reduction in their teenage pregnancy numbers, which would mean that there's actually an intersection between the teenage pregnancy and the family planning program in the country. This study did not try to find out how connected they are, but it shows that there's an effect between the two. And if we check across the geopolitical zones and the wealth quintile, you will notice that there's a drop across board for teenage pregnancy numbers. One thing that was very important, very interesting to see rather, is the fact that according to by education, the drop was highest among those that do not have any education, and the drop kept reducing by increase in educational attainments, while there was actually an increase amongst those that have more than secondary education. One of the reasons why this may have occurred is because of the fact that people in this cohort are actually is transiting out of this phase. And one of the reasons why family planning is encouraged to reduce teenage pregnancies because it gives the girl time to make life decisions. It helps to ensure that young people are able to contribute significantly to the economy of the society. Now, where do we go from here? The whole idea behind this visualization is for us to think critically, and I hope and I really pray that there are people that are policymakers in the health landscape in Nigeria on this call to think critically. Moving our money away from an intervention like this, does it help us as a people? Because if we have such a large dependent population figure as a country, and those people are having more children, because the total fertility rate of Nigeria stands at about 4 children per woman. If a lady starts early in her 15s to start having children, she'll most likely exceed that number. We have to think, do we need to do something about this? Or do we leave it as it is and hope for the best with fingers crossed? I do not think so. I want to believe that this is something that we should think about, especially because we want to make use of that very large youthful market that we have in Nigeria. Thank you very much for paying attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, and we can see some of the design features that are really key in these visualizations coming out. You can see the buttons that change the different slides over here. That is laid out in a nice way so that we're able to show not just one dashboard or one page, but multiple slides or pages all in the same visualization. Now, this visualization was crafted like the first visualization from Bijou in a platform called Tableau, whereas Sandra's, the second presenter, crafted her visualization in another platform called Microsoft Power BI. So you can see the diversity of the different platforms that have been shared in the showcase at this present time. Now, the next thing we're going to do as we celebrate the first 3 presentations is to do a little bit of a mini lesson, our first mini lesson. And this is a mini lesson to get you acclimated to one of the platforms that is done here in the Data Plus Design for Development program. And it is a platform that I'm sure you've seen visualizations from because a lot of online publications and organizations use this platform for their basic data visualization work. And that platform is called Datawrapper. So I'm going to invite Eva to take us through Datawrapper on her computer and talk to us about why we might use Datawrapper if we're interested to begin learning about data visualization before we get into some of the technical platforms that you're seeing in these presentations. So over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, Datawrapper has also been used in this presentation, and some of the scholars use Datawrapper, which we'll showcase later in the presentation. But Datawrapper is like one of the many visualizations tools out there. And I always tell people that if you want to learn data visualization, start from Datawrapper, because it's so easy to use, easy to learn. You don't need to code, and it introduces you to some of the most fundamental aspect of like data visualization and also data analysis. And this platform is widely used, is used by different organizations, including Leaders of Africa. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to walk us through a very mini lesson in Datawrapper. So if you want to follow along, one of the things that I'll tell you is that just go into your Google, just go into Google and just type Datawrapper, as you can see, and follow with the instructions. So if you just type Datawrapper, I'm going to share.
Eva, feel free to share your screen at this time.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. So as you see my screen, you just need to type Datawrapper. Yeah, then this is Datawrapper for you. So you just click on it. And what you need to do is that if you are here, just take your time to explore this website. There's so much things you can learn from this website. First of all, they have like different products in terms of like the chart, the maps, and the things that are here. There's also resources. I always come here to the resources. Take your time to look at the blog. There's a lot of blog posts on visualization, thinking about different charts and things that you want to use, and also the color patterns that you need to use when you're thinking about design. And here, these are some friendly guides. So take your time to explore Datawrapper. I'm not going to go in depth into some of the design element or the design aspect of data visualization. We are just going to create a mini visualization for you to see how easy it is to use Datawrapper and also to learn it. So first of all, if you are here, you can create an account. It's so easy. Or you can go in and start to create your visualization. So let's go in and start to create a visualization. So when you click on create, it brings you here. And before you can move on to the next page to see the various charts and figures that are there in Datawrapper, you need to add your data. And the data has been shared with you in the Zoom chat. So I'll show you the data that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the data on Nigerian GDP from 1961. Actually, 1960 is not there because Nigeria gained its independence. From 1961 to 2024. And in Datawrapper, there are a couple of ways to add the data to the platform. You can do copy and paste. You can upload it. You can connect it through Google, your Google Sheet, or you can use an external link. But for this class, I'm just going to do copy and paste. So you just need to copy the visualization, your data. Then you just need to paste it. Then after you've pasted, you say proceed. When you come to proceed, your data is now organized in a table form for you, which is looking good. So you could see here that if the data is in numbers, it shows blue. If it's in date, it shows green. If there is something wrong with your data, it's going to be red. That means that you need to work on your data. You need to correct whatever is going on. So from there, the data looks good. We have to come to check and describe. Oh, we have to go to check and describe, but you first of all have to go to proceed or to visualize your work. So when we came to proceed, Datawrapper has already created a nice line graph for me. The line graph is mostly like the default graph that you see when you come to Datawrapper. But as you could see on your left here, that is on my left, on your right, you can see that there are different charts and figures that you can create using Datawrapper. So there you have your bar chart, you have your stack chart and group chart. But one thing I would say is that it's very important to know which chart will speak well to the data that you have. I cannot, because this data is in numbers and I'm interested in looking at the GDP trend of Nigeria from 1960, since it gained independence to date, using anything like pie chart, donut chart will not really work well, because I'm interested in to see the trend, whether there is any volatility in the growth of Nigeria, or like how growth has been. So as you can see here, my default chart has been created. It looks great. I'm not going to do anything. If I'm interested in bar chart, I'll put in a data that will speak for bar chart, or that will work well for bar chart. So you come to refine. Then here it gives you the opportunity to refine your line graph. It's so easy, as you can see. So here you have your horizontal axis, you have the year. It looks good. I don't need to do anything. What I need to do is to turn off the grid line. The grid line is off. If you want more lines on your horizontal axis, you can. If you want tick lines, that is the tick. Here you can let it show, but I don't need anything. Now let's go to our vertical axis. So vertical axis here, you can change the range in terms of the minimum and maximum number of the growth rate here, but I'll just leave it like this. But then the format, as you can see, is percentage, but here if I click on any of the chart, it's not showing percentage. So I'll come in here to number format and change to percentage, and also you have the opportunity to change to whatever figures that you want, depending on what the type of data you are using. Then here the label, there are grid lines. I will turn off the grid lines, and the label, you see the label on the vertical axis is gone. I need it, so I'll turn it on. You can come here and change the colors if you want to any color that you want, but let's give it green, because the flag of Nigeria is green and white. So you can also change it depending if you want to do interpolation. You can change it to linear or anything. We just leave it on linear. You can also change the line graph here. So the line, you can do tick lines, you can do very thin, you can also do your dash lines. It depends on what you really want to show. So I will leave it on a tick line. Then as you can see, the label here, the label is showing that it's GDP percent. I'll take it off. I don't need it. Then here you can choose to show the value of the label if you want. So the value from the beginning is 0 and at the end. So currently, as of 2024, Nigeria GDP growth rate was at 3%. Not bad. So I'll turn those off. You can also label the lines if you want. You can have label at every point. Actually, let's have the label just to see something. I want to do some narration here for us. You can have it at every point if you want. You can show symbols. So symbols is like if you want to show circle at any point, you can show, like you can see the points there. It's a circle, which looks good. Then you can do area fill, but I don't really need area fill for this purpose. And so you can do so much with it. But what I'm interested in is, let's go to annotation. So now our visualization looks good. Let's come to annotation. So annotation allows you to now put in like, what is the title? What do you want people to learn when they see the simple visualization of yours? So I am interested in giving it a very good title. So you can see my title here. I would say slow down. So this is my title, looks good. The thing with Datawrapper is that you are not able to, you just have to deal with what they have. You can't really change in terms of like the headings and the things here. So this is what I want people to see when they see my visualization. The second thing that I'm interested in is I want to give a brief description of like what the takeaways should be. description here, as you could see. So if someone sees this visualization, they'll get a very good sense of like Nigerian GDP growth rate from 1960 till now. And here you can also do something called annotation. Annotation allows you to put text on the visualization if you want. I can walk you through a story, like say I'm interested in doing a little bit of annotation here and put it somewhere here and says that this place is 1960, early Independence Day. So you can tell a story in terms of like the growth rate if you want your audience to learn something from it. Early Independence Day, and also Civil War. As you can see, there was Civil War in Nigeria after independence. That was the Biafra War. So you can tell a story, and you can also say you could see that here, 1961 to 1969, there was like the early independence and also the Biafra War. You can walk people through a story. Then from 1970 to 1980, there was the oil boom. Nigeria got oil. So you can see here in that year, like GDP growth rate went so up. So you can tell a story. Then from 1980 onward, Nigeria implemented the structural adjustment change. You can see the effects of it. Then you come to 2000 to 2020, you could see that GDP growth rate was negative. It could be attributed to like the pandemic that happened. So you can tell a story, you can walk people through a story using your visualization. So I'll just say that this is like our mini lesson for data visualization, which is simple and it allows you to tell good story about your data and also about Nigerian GDP growth rate. Thank you.
Indeed. And Datawrapper is a really good starting place because, as you can see, you can't really move a lot around, right? It has sort of a templated look to it. And that's why a lot of organizations and individuals who do some visualization, particularly for news media, like Datawrapper. And I'm sure that many of you have seen Datawrapper visualizations that look similar to this in different spaces that you operate. And so that is a typical piece. So we invite you to create a free account on Datawrapper and just get started with it. Now, obviously, there's so much more that we can do when it comes to storytelling, as Eva was getting into. And that's the main thing. And that's the main focus of the data and design program, is not only displaying the data, but how we communicate to our audience a cohesive story that really tells what's going on behind the data, as Miss Eva was doing when it came to discussing eras of the Nigerian history. So thank you, Miss Eva, for a wonderful presentation or mini lesson. We're going to have another mini lesson in just a moment from Mr. Henry, who's going to talk about the design elements of data visualization. But before we do that, we want to invite our next presenter. Our next presenter is Marie Allaire, who joins us from France. Her visualization project looks at issues surrounding gender and politics, specifically this important concern that many people are focusing on the world over, which is the role of women in leadership positions in their home countries. And in this special visualization that she's going to take us through in just a moment, we're going to see how the discussion is taking place over the course of 2 French elections, which she used to visualize the role of women, both in terms of the political space, in terms of the fundraising space, and some takeaways when it comes to how we might promote gender inclusion in the political space, something that I'm sure many in our audience are curious and interested in. So I'm going to pass the mic now to Marie, who's going to get us started with her discussion.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon and good morning. I'm not sure you can actually see me right now, but it's okay. I'm going to start. Actually, the title of the presentation is "And so cicadas can money buy a women's election?" That was the question that I asked, and you may think that the title is a bit funny. It actually refers to a 17th century French fable written to warn the king about 2 types of people: the ants, those who work and save for hard times, and the cicadas, or crickets, if you wish, the big spenders who actually feast without thinking of winter. This research asks whether money influenced women's chances of winning a mayorship in France's local elections in the 2014 and 2020 municipal elections. And before actually sharing a few findings with you. You should know that France limits campaign spending for candidates running in cities of 9,000 inhabitants and over, and partly reimburses expenses for those that win 5% of the vote. Now, if we move on to the next slide, I'm just going to comment on 3 slides, but if we end just on a few data views, if you can just move on to the next one. Yeah, so this is fantastic. So this is the slide that I was just introducing, dark pink for women and green for men. If you happen to know the French geography, if not, well, then you're going to have to trust me. It shows actually that women are more likely to win in urban areas, but that actually comes at a price, as we will see later. We also see that in 3 departments, if you're looking at the small map on the left corner, we also see that in 3 departments in the last elections, or counties in US terms, not a single woman candidate ran in the 2020 local elections. And we found that on average, women still stand only half the chance of being elected compared to men. Altogether, and despite parity laws implemented some 25 years ago, only 1 in 5 town halls in cities of 9,000 inhabitants and above is actually led by women, precisely where political power is actually stronger and competition tougher. Moving on to the next slide now, we're looking at profiles at how women and men finance their campaigns and how they actually spend their money. So I would just wait for the next slide to be on the screen. The biggest gaps between men and women lie in income. Women receive fewer donations than men, while they rely more heavily on bank loans, a finding that actually mirrors broader structural inequalities. On the one hand, donations reflect the ability to raise money through networks, often wider for men, but we may also remember that they may also imply clientelist practices. On the other hand, because women actually earn less, they apply for more loans, but because they are less often seen as likely winners, it makes them look riskier to lenders, implying basically that loans may be harder to obtain, which does not guarantee a level playing field in the election. Moving on now to the next slide, we get to the question itself, which is, can money buy a women's election? And generally speaking, we found that spending did not guarantee victory. So yeah, this is the slide for either women or men. However, graphs suggest that the larger the city, the stronger the link between spending and winning, which means that it is actually harder for women to succeed in more competitive environments where they need both more money and more support to win. But the most striking finding here is the average cost per vote, which is always higher for women no matter what, but which is nearly 60% higher among those who failed to reach the 5% reimbursement thresholds, most of whom likely to be younger women, women from minority backgrounds, or those with little prior political experience. Now I'm just going to conclude with 3 key points. The first one is that this research revealed a major blind spot. And this spot is the French overseas territories, which have their own dynamics. We don't have the time to go through those now, but maybe another time. Second, money actually remains a near complete taboo in the election, which reminds us how much still needs to be explored. And finally, as recommended by the Venice Commission, all data and reports on elections should be sex desegregated, which is not yet the case in France, but for which we are now preparing some advocacy work. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Marie. And would you like to tell us a little bit about your organization as well? Because this project also feeds into a broader project that Marie's working on in thinking about how we can use data to help us discuss some of these really important issues surrounding gender inclusion in a variety of different spaces, including the political spaces you've seen here. So Marie, do you want to tell us just briefly about that organization? And also you can share the link in the chat to the LinkedIn so people can connect with you and the organization as well.
Yeah, that works. Well, basically, the organization is called Data for Women. And what we want to do is looking at, crossing data, gender, and democracy to empower women's organizations and women in politics as a whole. So it's very brief, but that's basically what we do. We're looking at other things, but that's the main, I would say that's the main purpose. Yeah, making democracy work for women, reinforcing parity, level playing field, all done through data, because we believe that data is power.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marie. And just draw everyone's attention to this slide in particular. I mean, these slides do a lot of things, right? There's a geo-coded element to them, a geography element to them, as you can see here. But there is also the element of size of the dot, of proportionality that's there. And so we can see that. And when we get into the results that are here, they're using not just pretty simple aggregated data, but data that is gathered at the candidate level. So every candidate contributed certain bit to the analysis here, in the sense that all these metrics about campaign finance and running and campaign elements were all at the candidate level and had to be brought together, summarized, aggregated to produce the lovely visualizations that we have here. And that can be a lot of work, because one of the biggest challenges of data visualization is actually the data shaping that goes on before you get to the visualizing. And sometimes that can be very easy depending on the type of data we have. Sometimes that can be quite hard to do. And I know, Marie, you worked very hard on shaping the data and preparing the data and dealing with the fact that accent marks oftentimes make it even more challenging when they're included in one data set and not another, and you're trying to match names and things of that nature. So very well done, and a lovely project. I want to invite all of our scholars at this time to share after their presentations their LinkedIn link, because I know many folks in the audience will be interested to connect with them and their work. So I want to invite all of our scholars to make sure to send their LinkedIn information in the chat so that we can connect. Let's go to our next presentation. Our next presentation is from Olewabumi Oromarigi, who is going to get us started into talking about something that's really, really interesting, which is the issue of natural disasters and disasters the world over. As we know, climate change is influencing a lot of things, including extreme weather patterns. But we also have those effects in broader disasters that are occurring in our societies and in our countries. And in this data visualization project, Olewabumi is going to take us through looking at some of those chief concerns and visualizing them using some really cutting edge data regarding disasters across the globe. So I want to invite you right now to turn on your camera and share a little bit more about your visualization project.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good to have you here. About 14 years ago, I lost a dear family to flood, the disaster in Nigeria here. And just last night, Jamaica is currently experiencing one of the worst hurricanes ever. And this draws us to the attention that disaster is real. And whether we like it or not, we will continue to experience upward progress, except something is done about it, either from you and I, from policymakers, our government. And on the continent of Africa, especially from the visualization, we can see Nigeria actually recording, very significant disaster over the years. From the data visualization, we could see that China has recorded, over the last 60 years, their, increase in disaster rates. Generally, when we look at disaster, what kind of disaster are we talking about? There are quite significant subtype of disaster, including the flood, which is under the hydrogeological. And then we see highest frequency, occurring with flood, right? And then followed by storm, right, under the natural disaster category. So we have man-made disaster, and then we also have the flood disaster. And then we see from technological perspective, air incidents, road accidents, keep being a major concern, right? And if you look at the number of disasters across the last 60 years, you see the rise in you see the rise around 2005. And in my research, I come to realize that in 2005, there were a lot of, disasters happening over several continents, about 442 thereabouts across continents. And top of this is the hydrological, that's the flood disaster, and also earthquake and wildfire. So why this? If you go to Professor, can you go to the second slide? That's the yellow. If you look at this, it tells us the risk index, right? We could say, oh, it's not happening around me, or Ghana is safe. But generally, when we look at Africa, we see that we are not completely either from man-made or from from natural disaster. As Nigeria is currently experiencing, we had one of the worst, flood in the last 2 years with the Mokwa, flood. About 300 people were missing, were dead, and several people missing, as well as the Maiduguri flood. And from that, Nigeria is even, I think, about on the low, the medium, right? You can also look at your own country. We can see Asia having having high risk index. And risk index talked about exposure and vulnerability. That is to say that on the continent, we can see our trend. And so that prepares us as Africans. What can we then begin to do? And so I came up with few recommendations, and it involves you and I, it involves the government, it involves policymakers, and for the opportunity like data and design development program, we can also begin to discuss this. Professor, please, can you go to the previous slide? If we look at the data provided by the EM database, I bet to disagree that we don't even have, disaster captured very well for Africa. And I struggle to even find my own local, data sets. And so we need to engage, because that way we can effectively predict on these things. And so wrapping up, climate-driven disaster will continue to intensify, right? Temperature, precipitation, and technology risk also will grow, right? Especially with the advent of AI, and Africa disaster burden is also increasing, right? And so we must all engage. We must all do our best, especially when it comes to climate, the flood. Don't throw your bin, right? In my recommendation, policymakers, especially when it comes to the environment, right? And this is just to create the awareness that disaster is real. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Olawabumi, for a wonderful presentation there. Wonderful presentation here, looking at the different trends in disaster events, and particularly the topical elements of those disaster events. I was particularly intrigued by this figure right here, that looks at these different categories of types of disasters from 1964 to the present, as well as that last slide that was quite nicely done with looking at the recommendations and what we call the World Risk Index. So if you're interested in studying disasters and preparedness and things of this nature, we encourage you to take a look at this World Risk Index as one place to get started. But as was mentioned, it's sometimes hard to find data that's more localized when it comes to doing early warning data and pieces when it comes to our local communities. Something to think about and something to build upon. Next, we're going to go to Patrick Narco, whose project is entitled Primary Education in West Africa, Investment, Access, and Outcomes between 2010 to 23. Patrick joins us from Ghana, and his project is going to look at the important aspect of education, and particularly investment in primary education in Ghana, but also throughout the entire West African region. So I'm going to now turn the floor over to Patrick, who's going to take us through some of the high-level numbers and comparative figures when it comes to the investment in this important age of a young person's life, that is their primary education. So Patrick, I want to invite you to unmute yourself, turn on your camera, and share with us.
All right, Prof. Peter, thank you very much. And team, thank you so much for joining us. So before I start, the first question that I want each and everyone to reflect is, what happens when school-going age child is not in school? That should be a question for all of us. What happens to your country if those children are not in school? So my name is Patrick Nyako, and I also work in the education space. Basically, this dashboard showcased primary education in West Africa, investments, assets, and outcomes. And it consolidated data from 2010 to 2023, basically data sourced from UNESCO. So if you look at the dashboard, the key highlights here is talking about the total number of out-of-school children that we had recorded from the past 2010 to 2023. And then focuses on completion rates, the average completion rate between that year, and then the government's investment or expenditure when it comes to primary education. Then the last one, which is focusing on learning outcomes, is the reading proficiency rate. So reading proficiency rate is very low. If you consolidate all of the data from 2010 to 2023, we see that reading proficiency rate is very, very low. So the question is, we still have some of the children that are also in school, but they are not reading. Now, when you delve into the data specific, there have been a lot of interventions that are in place trying to reduce the number of out-of-school children in West Africa. But for the current one, which is the 2023, looking at the pie chart there, for 2023, I concentrate on the top countries with a lot of out-of-school children. That was 2023. And Nigeria is having 62% out of the overall countries. It means that there are a lot of out-of-school children in Nigeria in 2023. But if comparatively, if you compare with government expenditure, Nigeria is not on top of the amount of money that goes into primary education. If you also focus on trends, you could see that a lot of intervention has taken place and out-of-school children has reduced a bit, but in a slow pace. Now, I also did something to compare other countries like my country, which is Ghana, and Liberia. Especially, we have an intervention in Liberia, organization that I'm working in, and then Nigeria, looking at the trend. So looking at the trend map below there, you could see that there has been a decline in out-of-school children in Ghana. Liberia got to a point where it's declined, but along the way, it increased. And then Nigeria is moderately fair. There haven't been a lot of interventions. Now, looking at this chart, there is a key highlight here. If you want a specific country or for a year, for instance, if you filter country like Ghana, where you can select country like Ghana, you'll be able to know the out-of-school children recorded for the past 2010 to 2023, the government expenditure, the trend of out of school, and then the top 5 countries is still there. So this is data that has been filtered for Ghana, and then the total amount that has gone into primary education. Now, for 2010 to 2023, Ghana has recorded 8 million out-of-school children, but this is maybe on a yearly basis where there have been a lot of intervention that has reduced it. But in terms of trend of out-of-school rate, you could see that out-of-school has reduced drastically from 2010 to 2020. We can also do for Nigeria to compare. If you look at Nigeria, for instance, as I indicated, from 2010 to 2023, Nigeria has recorded 118 million. And in terms of completion rate is very okay, but in terms of government expenditure, it's minimal. The trend, that is the most important thing, is along the way from 2010 to 2020, it's reduced, but still, if you project more along the way, there are a lot of work for Nigerians to do. Now, the point here of this data is that we need to call in policymakers, NGOs, into education space to advocate for government to commit a lot of fund into primary education, more specifically when it comes to out-of-school space, and also to advocate for learning outcome, for government to focus on improving learning outcomes among children in their primary education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And one of the key features that you can see in Patrick's visualization there is the ability to be able to filter the data. Now, we've seen that on a number of the other visualizations. We saw those little buttons that allow you to download the data, explore some different informational pop-ups that may pop up, or filter the data. And you may see that filter symbol, or you may see these drop downs right here. And this allows us to not only see the inclusive data visualization, but to allow our audience to actually interact with it and ask critical questions in the context of the data visualization. And that really takes our data visualization to the next level, because it doesn't just allow us to tell a story, but it also allows other people to explore potentially other stories when it comes to the data, and also to look at things that may be more interesting to them, say what their home country is doing in terms of its investments in primary education over the years. Now, we still see when we select on an individual country that there is some missing data, and that is always a concern when it comes to development data or data that we want to do to have a social impact, is that we're always facing some data that we have and some data that may not be available for certain years or certain time periods or certain entities. And so that allows us to see that, but it still allows us to be able to interact with that data and be able to ask some questions and explore those questions for ourselves. So thank you so much, Patrick, for a wonderful visualization project. I'm now going to pass it over to Henry, who's going to begin to introduce our next presenter and next set of presenters. So I'm going to now pass it over to you, Henry. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter. And moving from education, we are going to touch a bit on investment in the African entrepreneurship ecosystem. And you know, for the past decade, the African startup ecosystem has risen with incredible force, you know, driven by bold visionary founders and the growing way of innovations. For the next showcase, we are going to capture some story of the progress and potential, which will be presented by Akosua Dumfe-Kosa.
All right, thank you so much, Henry, for the introduction. So basically, my name is Akosua, and for my background, I'm an innovation scout at the Futuralist, as well as a virtual relationship manager with Fidelity Bank. So for my presentation is startup investment in Africa's Black founder ecosystem. So today we are looking at the story of money coming into African tech companies over the last 5 years. That's from January 2019 to May 2024. So you can see that it's been a time of huge change. We saw a big boom, then things slowed down, and now the market is getting smarter. So basically, this visualization story has 3 main parts: the big jump, the global pulse, and the smart future. So looking at the big jump, that's from 2019 to 2021. So we've realized that the first few years of this time were a massive rush. So we call this the big jump. So sadly, a lot of money was pouring into Africa. So this happened because people started using the internet, and also the population was very young, and global investors were looking for places to grow very quickly. So everything moved fast. So companies got much bigger checks and deals closed quicker than before. So looking at the visualization, you realize that the main leader in this jump was fintech, which focuses on money and banking services. So fintech was the first to show the world how big the African market could be. And also it became the dashboard for all other investments, showing investors that they could make great returns, hereby solving the problem that most people did not have bank accounts. So Henry, please can you move to the fintech dashboard for me? So looking closely at this fintech dashboard, we can see that a lot of the investment has been in the early and growth stages of companies like seeds, that's rounds for new ideas, and venture rounds as companies expand. We also see a mix of local African investors and a big global names putting money into these promising fintech startups. So looking at the companies, the fintech dashboard companies like Flutterwave, OPay, and Cheaper Cash stand out as top performers, showing how much innovation is happening in this space. So this activity clearly demonstrates the confidence in Africa's financial technology future. So going back to the first dashboard, other important areas like health tech and agri-tech also started to get attention. So this period showed the whole world that African tech was a major player. So the global pulse, looking at the line graph, the things hit their highest point around 2022. So it was a record year that proved the ecosystem potential. So the global economy faced problems, interest rates went up, prices rose, and investors everywhere got nervous and started to hold on to their money. So this wasn't unique to only Africa, it was a global pause. Because of this, the speed of investment had to slow down. The huge, massive deals became rare, and the excitement of the earlier years was replaced by a serious need to check if companies were truly making money. So looking at the bar chart from 2023 to May 2024, what we see now is not a failure, it's a market growing up. So even though less money is coming in, the investment is smarter. So right now, the goal is no longer just growing at any cost. Now the focus is on making a profit and building strong companies that can last. So the biggest share of money is still, when you go to the previous slide, you realize that the biggest share of money is still going to the top 4 countries, which we call the big 4. And these countries are Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, and South Africa. So they continue to get the most funding because their markets are very strong, and investors are mainly putting money into companies that have already proved their work well and have solid plans. So to summarize, the African tech story since 2019 is about starting fast and is now moving with smart choices. So we've moved from betting big to investing wisely. So Africa is still a great market because it has many young people, important problems to solve, and also clever entrepreneurs. So this current situation is helping the best company get even better, setting up the market for a strong future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akosia, for that insightful presentation on the African entrepreneurship ecosystem. And as she rightly pointed out, fintech continues to dominate over the years. And even though there was a dip somewhere around 2019, we have seen a rise. And currently in 2025, we are expected to cross somewhere 3 billion of investment in the continent. And that is a good one to highlight for those that are interested in the startup ecosystem of Africa. So for our next presentation, we have Christine talking about women executives in Africa's fintech startup boom. And this deep dive into gender dynamics, that is driving one of the fastest growing sectors, as Akosia presented. Both presentations are touching on the broader African ecosystem and what is happening with entrepreneurs. It explores how women founders and CEOs are influencing fintech innovation. However, it points out the progress as well as the persistent gaps where we have less than 11% of those in executive leadership for fintechs being women, and the rest, of course, being men. And I think Christine would highlight on this with some call to action for what lies ahead for the fastest growing sector in Africa. Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Henry. Good morning, good evening. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Christine. I'm a PhD candidate and also in organizational leadership. Very much concerned about gender diversity, democracy, and also how we can just make these spaces comfortable for women. So since my colleague has already shared how fintech has influenced or penetrated in Africa, mine will just be to look at how we are doing in terms of gender diversity, like how are the women sitting in the leadership positions within fintech. This is just how I developed like my dashboard. So the first thing I did was just look at how the gender composition is in terms of the companies that are sort of putting in, looking for investment in terms of fintech investment. And as you can see, the black shows that it's basically like a big boys game. So we are seeing that there's very little leadership in terms of women. When you look at the next dashboard, we're seeing that like a majority of the founders are just men. We have about 10.58% of women sitting in CEO positions, which means that even when it comes to decision making, product design, or services that can be channeled out to women or products related to women, then there's very little influence from women themselves. When you look at the trend in terms of how much has been invested or in terms of fintech and the number of women who are there, we can see that even as fintech is rising, we are seeing that we have very few organizations that are being led by women. So the gap is quite big across, even when you look at the countries which have been labeled as the top 4 in fintech investments, that's Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt. Still, there's that glaring gap where we don't have as many women in fintech leadership. Looking at the areas around fintech where we have like women CEOs and women-only founders, we're seeing like for the top 3 areas, there's fintech lending, there's digital banking, and there's payments and transfers. Those are the key areas where women are. But if we have more women in startups or in leadership roles, then we'll be able to see like a lot of women coming up, even for leadership positions, and even when it comes to the solutions or the designs that are being made for women. When you look at the countries, in terms of the countries where the women CEOs are coming from, we are seeing that yes, there are some fintechs which have women CEOs. They're based in Africa, but you'll find that maybe the founder comes from the global north, which is also a concern because now it means that even the solutions that are being made, are they really customized? Or are they targeting the African women? So we have an organization like in Kenya called the Aza Finance, but again, the CEO is from the global north, which is still, it's still a good thing, but still far off because now we are not seeing the indigenous solutions. We have other organizations like in Nigeria, we have High Invest, which also concentrates like on just giving finance to women within the agribusiness. So there are those organizations that are really doing well in terms of customizing solutions for women. But the question that we really need to ask is, since we are at an age where it's actually 30 years post the Beijing Declaration, how well are we doing in making sure that women are within these decision-making roles so that even when they're designing products, services, and solutions, they can really be inclusive. That is, women need products and services that are just designed specifically for them. And we can only do that if we have more women sitting in those positions of decision-making roles. So maybe the call to action will be for us to just raise awareness, like what we are doing now, tell stories, because there's a lot of scarcity of data in terms of just showing how women sit in CEO, founder, and startup places. So the more we raise awareness of this, the more we'll have women coming up and also just raising their hands to be mentored, to be sponsored for these opportunities. And then we'll have more of products designed to be able to just include women, because the biggest benefiter of financial inclusion, which has been brought about by fintech, has actually been women. And so we need to have more women voices designed, more women voices in these spaces so that they can be able to design products that can be more suited to the women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for a wonderful presentation. And, you can see the interactive features here in this presentation. And Henry, what are your thoughts on Christine's presentation, given that you do a lot of work in the investment and entrepreneurial and social impact spaces?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a good one. And one thing I want to highlight is the fact that, it's a similar data that Akosia and Christine are using, but you could see they are telling quite different story with the same data. And in the program, we highlight on the fact that you do not need every data set before you can tell a compelling story. Christine, for sure, is just focusing on the diversity side of investment among fintechs organization, which is truly something that really needs to be talked about, because fintech is booming. Currently, this year, they have raised over 50% of all investment that is coming to Africa. But if you have just less than 11% being female, it calls for more research into what is really happening. Are there some gatekeepers preventing women from moving in? Are investors just being biased towards males? All these questions that Christine has raised that can be a research topic for some of you. I mean, Christine has still been her PhD, and it's an interesting one. But again, too, her dashboard is quite clean, and it's something that you'll be talking about in the next few seconds as to, the importance of dashboard design, having all these spaces, your color choice and everything come into play nicely to have a good visualization that will support the story that you tell.
Indeed. And that is where we're going to go next on the subject of the design element, because as you know, the program is named Data Plus Design. And so the design elements of what we do are as important as some of the other elements that we do in terms of the data part. So I'm going to invite Henry to share his screen to take us through a very brief mini lesson, just like Eva did, on planning and doing a mock-up for a data visualization project that will ensure that you're able to incorporate some design features. And so we're going to take a look at that and what we consider when it comes to the layout of the visualization. And after Henry has done his mini lesson, I'm going to give some of the answers to the quiz that you answered at the beginning of today's session to test your knowledge about data visualization, including this design element that Henry is going to speak about. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Henry. Feel free to share your screen at this time.
So as we got to know, I mean, you have seen a number of dashboard designs. I want you to take a look at these examples and tell me what you see in the chat. So you have example 1 over here. These are all taken from Tableau Public. So just giving credit to those who created it. And yeah, what do you see from the example 1? This dashboard. This is example 2. It's giving you some seconds for you to assess it and tell me what you see from example 1, 2, and then we have example 3, which the first two are using the light theme, and then this one is going with the dark theme, which is something that Akosia also chose or blended the two with more like a dark background and then a white text content. Then we have the fourth example. I'll just go back to the example 1 quickly, and you can just share in the chat what you see. We have this dashboard that someone presented on Tableau Public. This is also another one. then we have 3, and then we have 4. Just within the next 30 seconds, anything that stands out to you from this. You can see from the first 2, it's great design, but then when it comes to how the dashboard is presented, it's not coherent and it's not helping any story to be told. We have a bar chart, there's the title being rating and salary. We have net units and then rejection rates, and that is all. Then here we have good graphs and charts, but then everything is so closely packed together, it becomes even very difficult to read, and it has a nice topic on fundraising, but I cannot really tell where the focus is on. But at least the charts are great, but then the overall dashboard appeal is not really forthcoming. Then we have this. You could see you have a title, Superstore sales overview, the year showing. We have some buttons that when you go to Tableau Public, you can switch between if you want to view sales, profit, quantity, and also the year. And we have some KPI bands over here and other charts that are neatly presented, helping to tell a good story. At a glance, you should be able to, within 10 seconds, be able to tell what a dashboard is about or get at least 1 or 2 salient information from this dashboard. And a similar thing to this, beyond the visual appeal, you could see that it helps tell a story. We have the actual KPIs on top, and then we have the number of abandoned calls. This is for a call center dashboard, and it follows through with all the data. Now, what we are trying to talk about within this short time is that it's always good that you have a mock-up before you build your dashboard. All the dashboard, the example 3 and 4, I can tell you point blank that the developers did not just start, building up on what they did when they created the chart. They most likely would have had a dashboard mockup that would influence the final dashboard presentation that we see. And why is it important to have mockups before you proceed to build our dashboard? It clarifies the dashboard purpose. At least, mostly, if you're following the design trail, by the time you get to building your dashboard, you have completed your chart. You can do your mockup even before you start your overall design, or at least when you are done creating your individual chart, whether using Power BI, whether using Tableau, it's always good you have a dashboard that could show the overall purpose and insight you want to show. It also saves you time from redesigning and reworking. If you do not have a dashboard that will speak to what you want to do, mostly there's a higher chance you come back to redesigning stuff. It also ensures user friendliness and the ability to read through coherently and help people make very good decisions from the data, be able to get straight insight within the shortest possible time, which mostly is set for 10 seconds. Now, this is an example that I built myself for COVID-19 cases in Africa. And before I got to this final dashboard, this is what I did. So this is the mock-up for what you see over here, right? So this is nicely done, but then when you come here, it's kind of be a mess. Don't worry. I think this one kind of makes sense. Side by side, you get to see that I have this panel or the pane on the left here at the right side, sorry, the left side. And then I have the overall designs that we see here, the title, everything being shown. And mostly you see that we have color code being red, black, and green. And the use of that is especially in Tableau, you have something we call containers that you can use to clearly design your dashboard. And the use of containers is really encouraged, especially if you are dealing with Tableau. And I believe with Power BI, it has its own way of also helping you arrange things nicely. The call to action for this is that for everybody interested in data and design, your dashboard must speak and communicate and help you tell the story as effective as possible. And you can do this best by using a mockup. Without a mockup, you most likely will find yourself going back and forth with your design. But after building your individual chart, which you bring together to form the dashboard, it's always good you have a mockup of what you want to do. The mockup could be designed with any tool, maybe using PowerPoint, Google Slide. You can use maybe an iPad. You can even use a paper and pen, whichever one that works for you. However, you want to know what it is that you are visualizing or imagining in your head before you translate it into the dashboard. I have built a number of dashboards where I just started to do things without a mock-up. And after learning this trick and this secret that, okay, it's always good you get a mock-up, and with that, you can flow through your dashboard design efficiently and more easily. It has really saved me time. So for this mini lesson, the important thing we are highlighting is that in your dashboard designs, it's always great you employ a mockup, and the mockup will help you leverage other tools like using padding spaces, having the right headings, deciding on where you want your title to be, where you want your filters to be, the spacing that will be adequate for the graphs, and everything that you are going to work on when you start building your own dashboard, or if you're already building dashboard. So we just want to encourage the use of mockups and also applying other design concepts like spacing, so that when someone looks at your dashboard, it is communicating clearly without not so much information, because everything is not really clustered together. They cannot differentiate what this is and what that is. And it will take some bit of practice for you to perfect it, but whenever you are done with it and you get to a level where you are truly good, you find that it's very useful and it will save you a ton of time, and also make your readers or anybody that will take a look at your dashboard be able to clearly get your call to action and be able to follow through with whatever that call to action may be. Thank you. And this is just a brief on the essence of mockups for building dashboards.
Indeed, and there are some comments in the chat and questions. People were really excited by this mini lesson, particularly because they probably thought about these data visualization projects that everyone's seeing today and thinking about how they could carry off such an organized and cohesive design project using data. And it is really difficult. We're not all born with the design eye, right? We don't all think about things in the way that will make it organized, beautiful, and intuitive for the audience. But it takes time. It takes practice. The projects that you're seeing as part of this showcase were all part of an iterated process of draft, redraft, draft, redraft, feedback, 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 and all of this. So you're seeing the end or the conclusion of a process that took time for many of our scholars to get that design pieces and features right. And so it takes time, but start on that journey and start with a plan, as Henry mentioned, because those who don't start with a plan will end up with a Tableau or a data dashboard or report that is going to be all over the place. And our goal is to tell that story effectively. So it's going to be very important for us to be able to do the planning at the beginning. So with that, I want to share a little bit about the results to the questions that were asked at the beginning of today's session before we get into our next set of presentations. And we have 3 more presentations that will be done live before we get into your voting for audience choice and the awards. So let's talk about the answers to these questions. The first question was, why is storytelling important in data visualization? And I think most of us knew the answer to that, and that's probably the reason why you showed up to today's showcase and workshop, which is that it connects data to human understanding and decision making. That's what we're trying to do. And one of the key things that you've noticed about the visualization projects is that most of them had some sort of policy relevant piece to them, or they had a call to action. And Henry just used that word, call to action, because we want our visualizations to, promote our understanding and also to get us to do something, right? We have all those challenges that we face, and we want to be able to use that data to actually activate the change that we want to see. So I think most of us got that answer right. The second question was, why is it important to round most figures in a data visualization? As you can see, many of the figures round to the nearest percentage point or nearest number. And the answer is B, which was to reduce the cognitive load and make values easier to read and compare. In addition to that, it also means that we're showing a realistic concept of precision, because many of the statistics that we use are not that precise. They are estimates themselves. So when we show decimal points all the way out to 3, 4, 5 decimal points, we're actually giving people a false sense of the precision of our estimates that we're using to be able to display our data. So rounding, for many reasons, when it comes to the numbers that we're displaying and showing as part of a data visualization, is absolutely important to being able to do that. I'm going to come back to the last two answers to the questions before we get into the awards. But with that, I'm going to go to our next presentation, which will not be a presentation by the author themselves, but we're going to show this visualization for you. And this comes from Lydia, and Lydia comes from Eswatini. And one of the nice things about this visualization project is it's using another platform which you haven't seen today, but I'm sure many of you have seen it online in your social media feed, and that is Flourish. So let's take a look at her data visualization here. She is unable to present today, but we did want to show her visualization project because she is up for an award. So this is her visualization project, and it is entitled Africa's Pharmaceutical Market and Ecosystem. So she's looking at this issue of pharmacy and pharmaceutical products. So if you flip through this project right here, one of the things you'll see, missed the first one, is that Flourish allows for the interactive visualization as well as the animated elements of visualization. So if you've ever seen those counters online with the flags where the bar charts are moving and things are overtaking each other over time in rank, well, likely you are seeing a visualization that is done in Flourish. It's really good for animation. So I'll play that one more time. I'm going to play that. So it's looking at the top 10 pharmaceutical markets by market value. And we can see that South Africa and Nigeria have consistently been at the top, but some other countries are coming up as well. So if you flip through the visualization here, she's got a nice point chart here. We also have I believe this is the sunburst chart right here. So you can highlight it over here. These are what we call the tool tips. So you've seen that on many of the visualizations in today's session here. And this also has the ability to filter, the different pieces. So the share of the market by company in the African market, it's generally dominated by a couple of different pharmaceutical companies when it comes to the products that we see. And we can see the countries with the largest Grenfell investments in this space in pharmaceutical manufacturing. So it's a lovely project. It has that animated feature, and it was completed in a Flourish. So we want to congratulate Lydia on a wonderful project. The next presentation, which will be live, comes from Genevieve. And Genevieve's project, let me go back here to her title slide. Genevieve's project focuses on the important aspect of non-communicable diseases and the related implications of those non-communicable diseases. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Genevieve, who I'm going to ask to turn on her camera and share with us a little bit more about her findings and her data visualization project. So over to you, Genevieve.
Good day, everyone. My name is Genevieve. I'm a licensed dietitian, and my topic is on exploring non-communicable diseases, its risk factors, and mortality rate. And I'm passionate about this topic because over the last 6 months, it's been one of the most talked about topics in my country, Ghana, where one teaching hospital is recording about 10,000 cases of non-communicable diseases. So imagine the national data being published and what the results will be. Please, can we move on to the next slide? Yes, so the data is from the World Health Organization. Please, can we move on to the next slide? Yeah, and it's as of the year 2019. And WHO is saying that as of that year, 7 out of 10 people's death was as a result of non-communicable diseases. And it was prominent in Europe and Asia and other parts of the world. However, in Africa, the situation was a bit milder, not better, just a bit milder. And the WHO is also saying that the leading cause of death as a die year were from cancer, respiratory diseases, and diabetes. And in the next time, going forward, we'll be looking at the risk factors and what led about to these diseases. And South Africa is going to the red zones, and we'll look at why that is so. And we'll also look at the gender differences and also the risk factors associated with them. Please can we move on to the next slide? Yeah, it was interesting that when we look at some lifestyle habits like alcohol consumption, males were leading, and males could consume about 14 liters of alcohol compared to females consuming about 2 liters of alcohol. Yeah, it was also prominent in overweight as a metabolic risk factor, where more females were prevalent in obesity compared to males. And it was also the same when it comes to sedentary lifestyle. Now, interestingly, when we look at an environmental risk factor as a cause of NCD, there has been energy transition as of the year 2019. 94% of people living in rural areas were still dependent on charcoal and firewood for their daily activities. And it's not saying it's evil, but we are just saying it predisposes you to respiratory diseases, and then at the end of the day, contribute to the numbers. Okay, moving on in turning a spotlight on North Africa. It was evident that North Africa was leaving majority of the individuals in North Africa were leading a sedentary lifestyle, and that also influenced the prevalence of obesity in their country. And it's also the same thing here that more females were obese in North Africa compared to males. In the numbers were otherwise. It was rather more males being obese compared to females. And moving on, I will also look at hypertension and nutrition risk factor. So the WHO has a recommendation that from your breakfast to your dinner, your salt intake here should be 1 teaspoon from breakfast to dinner. The WHO has given their own Sustainable Development Goals that by the year 2030, there should be a 25% reduction in premature mortality rate. Please, the next slide. Premature mortality rate. And it also influences reduction in tobacco intake, reduction in hypertension, and all that. However, that is on a corporate policy. You and I also have a responsibility that we will take care of ourselves and not add up to the negative numbers. So when you think of today's showcase, just think that you and I will not add up to the negative numbers and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Genevieve, for a wonderful presentation. And you can see this is actually a visualization that uses a couple of different platforms. The main platform that it's using is Datawrapper. So all the visualizations that are there are using the same platform with Miss Eva shared with us earlier in today's session. So you are able to see those that were there. In addition to that, you see that Canva was used to kind of bring together those visualizations into one presentation or into several different, dashboards or pages that we showed as part of the project. So that's the platforms behind the scenes for this project. I'm now going to pass it back to Henry, who's going to get us into the next presentation, which unfortunately the presenter is not available to present, but Henry's going to talk a little bit about her visualization project.
Yeah, so this project is titled Breaking the Stigma, Explore Mental Health in Africa Narrative. Basically, the project takes us into the world of African literature, where stories will not just be on paper, but mirrors society and shows the struggles and healing of various people that authors get to narrate. In this project, the scholar sheds light on how mental health issues, mostly stigmatized in our society, could be brought to light as a way of creating awareness, resistance, and also restoration. It kind of also examines how general misconceptions and spiritual interpretations of mental health within the African context could be presented as a way of creating awareness through African fiction. Most of the authors that she used for her project were females, and they courageously showed how mental health should be brought to light in our context as Africans. And unfortunately, she will not be here to showcase this, but then So it was equally a good showcase project that she works on as a capstone, taking Africa fiction, reading it and distilling how many times, some words were used relating to mental health. So in her project, it mainly focused on building some bar charts that shows the number of times that some issues relating to mental health and general awareness creation was mentioned. And it was, a good one. We will move on to our next presenter, presenting on, is compliance with the Abuja Declaration sufficient to improve health outcomes, a case study of Nigerian state. And this project is talking about, public health policy and accountability, exploring one of the most important health commitment, that is the Abuja Declaration of 2001. And under this declaration, nations pledged to allocate at least 15% of the annual budget to health. But 2 decades later, the question still lingers. How well are the countries doing, especially in the context of Nigeria? Are they living up to this promise? And we will call on Kafaya to take us through her showcase project.
Okay, hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Kafaya Talawude. I work with Development Governance International Consult in Nigeria. I'm specialized in development management, research, and business development. So as Henry said, so in 2001, to respond to the poor health outcomes experienced in many African countries, the African Union member states came together in Abuja and made a declaration that African countries should allocate a minimum of 15% of their budget to the health sector. So, and this also involves the subnational level government as well. So, what this project aimed to do is to visualize the level of compliance of the 36 states in Nigeria, and also to assess the effect of their level of compliance on their health outcomes over the years. So to do this, I downloaded the Accountant General's report for all these 36 states from 2020 to 2023, extracted the expenditure data and calculated the percentage of their expenditure that they allocated to the health sector over the 4 years. And the first bar chart shows the amount that each of the states allocated over the 4 years, while the second chart shows the average proportion of their expenditure allocated to the health sector across all the 36 states. And this shows us that Sokoto State had the highest percentage expenditure allocated to health, while Ogun State had the lowest, and Ogun State is down below the graph. Then the second one, the third chart, which is the map of Nigeria, shows the health service coverage index. So my team at DJI Consult in Nigeria recently calculated the service coverage index for all the 36 states in Nigeria. So this service coverage index shows how close a state is or a country is to achieving universal health coverage. It's also a measure of health outcomes. So we did this, I calculated it, I plotted it as this map we are seeing, and this map shows us that Federal Capital Territory and Lagos, that are the deepest green there, have the highest service coverage index, while Sokoto State and Kebbi State had the lowest service coverage index. So you're looking at the scatter plots on the left, the bottom left. So this shows us the effect of their level of compliance, the state's level of compliance to the Abuja Declaration on their health outcome, which is the service coverage index. So we can see that most of the states that have that allocated a high proportion of their expenditure to the health sector have low SCI, that service coverage index. Looking at Sokoto State, Jigawa, Kebbi State, though they have the highest proportion of their health, their expenditure allocated to the health sector, they still have the lowest service coverage index. Then the other scatter plot shows the influence of the state's financial strength in their level of compliance to the declaration. We want to know whether it is their level of their financial strength that influences whether they are able to allocate up to 15% of their budget or expenditure to the health sector. So this scatter plot analyzes that, and we can see that states with you can see that the size of the state budget does not really have much influence in how much the state or the proportion of the state's expenditure that will be allocated to the health sector. Going by what we have here, Sokoto State, Jigawa State, that have the small budget size, they are the ones that allocated up to 15% or the highest percentage of their expenditure to the health sector. While those that have the largest budget size, like Lagos State, like Delta State, they did not allocate, they are not among those that allocated the highest to the health sector. Then looking at the table on the upper right corner, the table shows us the exact amount, the average health expenditure for all the states, the per capita expenditure, and the service coverage index for all the states. And what we can see here, Lagos State, which allocated only only about 8% of their budget on the average to the health sector, had the highest amount spent. So this shows us that having a large budget does not mean you are going to allocate a large proportion to the health. And again, it is not the percentage of the expenditure or budget that is allocated to the health sector that matters. It is the exact amount, because we can see that despite not allocating a large proportion of their expenditure to the health sector, states that have big budgets were able to allocate a lot of money to the health sector, and they are also the states that have the highest service coverage indices. So what this tells us is that while it is important for states or countries to comply with the Abuja Declaration of allocating up to 15% of their budget or expenditure to the health sector, that is not the only factor that is important. That is not the only factor that they should consider. Other factors have to be considered. For instance, from what you can see on this table, states need to work more on improving their revenue generation. They need to improve in their revenue generation so that they can have a large fiscal space such that no matter the amount, any proportion of their expenditure that is allocated to the health sector will translate to an amount that is large enough for them to have impact in their health sector. And again, they should need to ensure efficiency in spending so that beyond allocating a large amount to the health sector, they will also, whatever they are allocating to the health sector, we have a lot of impact. So this is what I have to present today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kafiat, for a wonderful presentation and a great visualization and application of some of the research and consultancy work that you're doing in the space of this health service coverage index that you've done, that sort of helps summarize some of the patterns of investments and energy and attention to healthcare and proper healthcare in the country, and fulfilling the mandate to provide quality healthcare to all Nigerians. So I think this is a really important project, and it brings together a lot of great and innovative data in that respect. So thank you so much for a lovely presentation. We're going to now go to our final presentation before we do the audience choice voting. And our final presentation comes from Mora. And Mora is doing a project that's looking at issues surrounding Kenya's budget and thinking about how we ensure that our budgeting priorities match our priorities when it comes to the people that live in our country, and particularly the inclusion of women in those considerations when it comes to budgeting. And so with that, I want to invite Mora to unmute herself and to open up her camera and share a little bit about her visualization project.
So here comes the last one, and the last one comes with all the bananas that Mama left behind. So may you enjoy all the bananas. My name is Mora Obiria. I work at Nation Media Group. a senior gender journalist, and my work spans across gender transformative communication and gender transformative gender equal approaches and also development. Now imagine yourself being in a family where your brother loves chess and your sister also loves soccer. But every time there's money in the household, they always budget for your brother who is going for chess, and they forget about your sister who loves soccer. So in the long term, and then we have so many other households doing the same thing. What do you think will happen in the long term? And that brings me to my presentation. So when you're thinking about this man and this woman, this girl or this boy, and their needs that they need to build themselves, the interest, the needs, and you look at the income that is present. And so when you're talking about gender responsive budgeting, you're thinking of the different needs of different genders within a unit. And when you budget, you make sure that the interests are also included in the budgeting. So gender responsive budgeting is a process. It's not a destination, but a journey. When you're thinking of where you're starting from, where to ending, you're thinking of who you're going to meet at the road. And these are different people, different needs. And so the budgeting thinks about how do you going to ensure that there's gender equality through how you budget? How do you ensure that the whole formulation from how you're thinking of what you're going to do to improve the household, the welfare of everyone in the unit, then that comes in as a gender responsive budget, thinking of everyone. So why is it a smart approach? It's a smart approach because you're thinking of addressing inequalities that are pulling behind every person who is within the unit. And unit here, we are talking about our communities where we're coming from, because we are talking of the government budgeting for us, budgeting for our needs, budgeting for our access to water, budgeting our access to electricity. So it is a good gender responsive budgeting. It's a good budgeting because it considers everyone within the population. Next. So when you're looking at Kenya, Kenya is one of the African countries that have committed to SDG, Sustainable Development Goals that were passed, approved, and adopted by the countries in 2015. So it did commit that in every budget that it's going to make, whether it's national or county level, it's going to make sure that it does take into consideration of all the population within its unit. So in the Constitution, we do have provisions that provide for that equality in budgeting. And we also have the National Gender Inequality Commission that has also provided guidelines into how the counties and the national government can also budget and ensure that everyone is included to ensure that the development. Next. So far, we are seeing that the budgeting is very necessary. But how does Kenya play in the national and the international platforms? Does it have a GRP? It does not have. But the question is, does having a GRP policy have any influence in making sure that the counties or the government at the high level, top counties, top countries, or the bottom countries? When you look at the top 10 countries, you realize that all of them do have the GRP policies. Gender gap, basically, you're talking of the inequalities between the men and the women within the countries. So the higher the index, the lower the inequalities. So when you're looking at these old countries and you realize only one country from Africa is in the top. In the lower, eight countries are from Africa. So that tells you something, although all of them except one country does have a GRP. So it does not tell you that having a GRP really means that you're going to have development. So something has to change. So when you're looking at the budget in Kenya, the ministry, the Gender State Department of Gender has had a high increase of budgeting, but you cannot tell how that money has been spent because there's no available breakdown of how that money has been spent. Next. When you look at the Vision 2030, already it does tell us what are the areas that the government needs to invest in: healthcare for the women, jobs and economic empowerment, education for the girls and free water for the girls and the women in informal settlements. But then that is not really happening because you cannot tell, we do not have that data. Next. And so what is the current status? The current status, of course, the movement to have the gender budgeting within the national and county government started in 1990s. But what you're already seeing is that the much of the investment is on sanitary towels, on Jamii Inua program, which is a cash transfer for the ones who are orphans, who are poor, who have disabilities, or we also have funds for the women to access at a low interest. So that's much of the focus, but we do not have any other focus on what is it that each county is doing. So when you go to the next slide, please. If you go into the next slide, you realize there's a problem, a serious challenge in the national and the county budgeting. When you look at the national budget, already you're seeing there's an increase in the budgeting, but you cannot follow the money because there's nowhere you'll be told that this is the amount of money that have been used for this and this. When you go to the counties, there's a serious problem there. The county departments for gender are looked together with so many departments that you cannot go and say, this is the budget for gender. All the budget is looked together. And then there are other counties like Laikipia, in Nairobi, where even the gender is hidden in between inclusivity. So still, we do not have any budget specifically for gender. So these challenges, one of them having these fragmented departments, which are looked together, it becomes so difficult to follow the money. And then even the available information does not give you a breakdown of how the money has been spent. That's a serious problem. And then even the budget, the annual budget on how the money has been used, it doesn't tell you this is the number of women and men who have been benefited, but they just tell you this is the number of beneficiaries. So you cannot still tell how, you cannot follow the money. So what are the recommendations? What needs to change so that we can have gender equality at its best and vision? We should be having standalone gender departments of the counties so that you can follow the money and even ask where is that money. We should be having a tracking system for how all the counties of the national governments are using the money. And then we should be having these gender indicators of who specifically has been targeted and who has benefited and how has it changed the money that has been spent for this money. So in conclusion, you cannot have gender equality until you start from how you budget. Just the same way in the house, if you're having that boy who wants chess and you're having that girl who wants soccer, but you cannot budget for both of them, then you're having a problem. One day, you realize that the talent for this girl was in soccer and the talent for this boy was in chess. So you uplifted the boy and you left the girl. So that's a serious problem in the national development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maura, for a wonderful presentation and sharing those insights, in particular that data visualization that you did share about the issue of the participation and the gender-based participation in budgeting. In fact, that in some countries it's made a difference. In other countries, there are some other factors that we have to take into account about the process, about the transparency of the process, about how institutions are arrayed. And I think you were able to really take us through some of those elements and get us thinking about the importance of that. So I really appreciate a wonderful presentation there. All right, we're now going to go into our awards, beginning with the Audience Choice Award. So in just a moment, you're going to see a survey on Zoom that's going to pop up, and it's going to invite you to cast your vote for the Audience Choice Award. And while you're casting a vote for the Audience Choice Award, I'm going to share some additional projects that weren't even presented in today's showcase, but were also great visualization projects as well from our cohort, as we recognize all of our scholars in the 2025 cohort, in addition to those who presented today. So I'm going to share those that are up for the Audience Choice Award. I'll remind you of them because some of them presented a bit of time ago. We have Bijou Atequist's presentation entitled The Big Picture of Ghana's Tourism. We had Sandra Winniwright, whose project was entitled Property Tax, Can African Countries Benefit from It? We had Motobidem Okumo's project on family planning and teenage pregnancy in Nigeria and family planning usage. We also had Marie Alares, a project entitled Ants and Cicadas, Can Money Buy a Women's Election? We also have Oluwabumi Morarigi, whose project was now called Global Disaster Hotspots, Who's at Risk. We had Patrick Nyarkos, whose project was Primary Education in West Africa, Investment, Access, and Outcomes, 2010 to 2023. We had Akosua Demfe Corsa's presentation entitled Startup Investments in Africa's Black Founder Ecosystem. We had Christine Agesa, whose project was entitled Women Executives in African FinTech Startup Boom. We also had Lydia Bisikin, whose project was entitled Africa's Pharmaceutical Market and Ecosystem. We have Genevieve Awu Kabina, whose project was entitled Africa's Silent Killer, The Rise of Non-Communicable Diseases. We also had Ramatu's Empraz visualization, which is entitled Breaking the Stigma, Exploring Mental Health and the African Narrative. We had Kafea Alawale's project, who is on Is Compliance with the Abuja Declaration Sufficient to Improve Health Outcomes, a case study of Nigerian states. And last but certainly not least, our last presenter, Mora Obira, whose presentation was entitled Kenya's Lost Opportunity for Development, the Case for Gender Responsive Budgeting. So you will see the Audience Choice Award will come here. This is only an award that can be voted on those who are present in our Zoom meeting. So maybe some of you have gone to showcases, particularly live showcases where they share a link and everyone's sharing it to get their votes in last minute in different places and multiple times. You will have one person, one vote for the Audience Choice Award, which we'll review in a moment. So invite you to begin voting now, and we can see those votes are coming in. But while you're voting, we want to highlight a number of different projects that were not presented. For the sake of time, we could only have 12 of us present at the showcase, but there are a lot of good projects and that are very much in line with what you saw today. We have the project on maternal health from Cynthia Grace Otieno. We have a project on Eswatini's agricultural issues and concerns from Silindile Magongo as well. And you're just seeing just some aspects of their projects on the screen. We had a wonderful and timely project from Abdul Rahman Ajibola and his project looking at the issues of universal health coverage in the country of Nigeria. We also had a beautiful project from Victoria Hwanga from Namibia looking at how Namibia is dealing with issues of climate change in their country. And I'll point out that Namibia was one of the countries with some of the highest levels of women inclusion, according to the index that Morad shared. And they also have a woman president or leadership as well. We also had a visualization project on issues surrounding migration and refugees from Avance Magiri. We also had a project on human rights and politics from Henry, and you can only see his photo because some of our projects here in the Data Plus Design program, some of them are able to be shared publicly, but some of them deal with some very sensitive information. And so we're not showing Henry's visualization projects for those reasons, but it was a really helpful project thinking about issues surrounding issues of human rights in the country of Zimbabwe. We also have a beautiful project from Tracy Nwanga, who looked at the issue surrounding Zimbabwe's energy crisis and renewable energy potential, and a great project looking at manufacturing and the importance of manufacturing output from Admiro Andala as well. And so we have some wonderful projects here that were done alongside those that were presented here as well. The other thing I will mention is that we also want to give special recognitions, in addition to those that I showed, to a list of other scholars who completed their capstone projects and have made significant projects, including those who may be works still in progress. Fuyani, Jijoho, Nahash, Neo, Sanusu, Penjami, Serafina, Tinaminimi, and Victor as well. So congratulations to you and to the entire cohort, including those who presented, but as well as those who I've mentioned here at the end of today's session. Now, if you're looking to vote for the Audience Choice Award, and we can see 71% of you have voted already, we invite you to find where it says polls on the bottom bar of your screen. So if it's not popping up, that is likely where it is. Or alternatively, we see some directions on the phone from Bijou, who shared that there. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to be able to do that. And as many said, sometimes the polling is hidden under the More button on Zoom. They keep changing around the buttons from update to update. So that's where it is. I'm going to give a couple more seconds for the votes to come in here for the Audience Choice Award. And we're going to just leave it open here for those votes to come in, just in case there are any last votes. But I do want to, while those last votes are coming in, share with you and remind you of the special awards that will be given. Because everyone who presented today has been given a showcase award. So you have listened to people who have already received the awards. So these awards are in recognition above and beyond the opportunity to present in today's showcase. And those include the Best Visualization Award, which we're going to share at the end, the Public Policy Impact Award for advocacy projects with extensive policy analysis and impact, the Data and Design Award for Best Design Features in UX UI Design, the Social Impact Award, project most likely to spur innovation and development, the Research Award, Best Project with Clear Implications for Research, the Activism Impact Award, the Best Project that raises awareness and promotes action, and then the Audience Choice Award. So please get your vote in. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds here to get your vote in here to be able to answer those questions. And so let's go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So we're gonna stop that poll, and we will give you the results at the end of the session today. So let's start off with our first award. Our first award goes to our scholar who's made a project that has explicitly emphasized issues surrounding public policy work. So it's a project that has a public policy element to it, and shared that as part of the project. And that award goes to Patrick Nyarko and Olabumi Oramigi. So their projects on primary education in Nigeria and the project that looked at disaster issues worldwide. So they received the Public Policy Award. Congratulations to you both. So let's move on to our next award, the Data and Design Award. And this is a special award for the cohort which created the most elegant and beautiful data visualization. Or they were all very elegant and beautiful, as many of you saw, each in their own way. But we give this one out that particularly excelled at bringing together those design features as part of the process. And this award goes to one award winner this year, and that's Mutubidem Okomos for her project Family Planning and Teenage Pregnancy in Nigeria, Family Planning Use. So we can see the use of a beautiful dashboard with iconography beautifully laid out, and the use of colors to be able to share some of the key aspects of things. And if you recall in the poll that we shared earlier, the quiz, one of the key things was the issue of colors. So we can see that. So congratulations to you, Mutubidem. The next award, the Social Impact Award, goes for a project or projects that are most likely to spur innovation and development. And this award goes to Bijou Atequist and Christine Agesa, particularly according to the panel that assigned these awards, particularly because your projects ended on particular calls to action that are going to help us motivate ourselves to create different policies and innovations that will grow out of that. Innovations in tourism, in the case of Bijou's work, and then issues surrounding an influx of attention to the issues of gender inclusion when it comes to the role of women in the entrepreneurial specter and sector, according to Christine's work. So congratulations to you, Bijou and Christine, for the Social Impact Award. Now we go to the Research Award. This is the best project or projects with clear implications for research and hardcore research. And those awards go to 3 awardees this year because each of them had projects that were really thinking about things through the lens of research and a research question. And that award goes to Genevieve Awa Kabina, Akafiat Alawale, and Silindile Magongo, who didn't present today, but whose work was a really useful look at innovations in the agricultural sector and what people are dealing with in terms of the challenges they face and how research may be used to solve those challenges. So each of you 3 were ones that excelled at bringing not only data visualization to the fore, but to help us think about things in ways that research can really be used to impact our societies and confront the challenges that we face. We also have the Activism and Impact Award, which is a new award this year, which is the project that raises awareness and promotes action. And we have 2 awardees for this, and that is Lydia's project that raises awareness about the role of pharmaceutical manufacturing in the pharmaceutical space, particularly when it relates to public health research, and Henry's project, not presented here for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, but a project that looked at issues surrounding human rights and activism in his home country of Zimbabwe. Congratulations to you both. Now, let's go to the Audience Choice Award. That's the special category award, the Audience Choice Award. And in some years, it's been a close tie for this. And I think that is the case this year as well. So in that case, given that there is 1 or 2 votes separating these 2, I'm going to hereby award both of these Audience Choice Awards to the top 2 vote getters, because we have a very small sample size. So keep that in mind. Not a small, very small sample size, but not a massive sample size, I should say. So in the sake of rounding, we have 2 winners. And the first winner is Bijou Atequist's The Picture of Ghana's Tourism Project. So congratulations, you have won one of our Audience Choice Awards. And the second Audience Choice Award goes to Genevieve Awu Kabina's Africa's Silent Killer, The Rise of Non-Communicable Diseases. So both of you have successfully won the Audience Choice Awards. And we thank you, audience, for staying with us for the entire session today. And before we say our concluding remarks, we do want to go back to our visualization quiz that we started with. And we had 2 more responses that we shared, which was, what should we do to avoid when adding colors to a chart? And the answer is actually using red and green combinations that may confuse color-blind readers. So one of the things that we talk about in data design is not only the message of our visualizations, but also making our visualization as accessible as possible. And that's really important to think about those with visual or other impairments who may be interacting with our visualization. And lastly, what is the purpose of using a consistent scale across multiple charts? Well, the answer is to help viewers make accurate comparisons. We want to use visualizations to tell a story. That's what our theme of today's showcase is all about, is telling stories with data. And part of telling stories is allowing for comparison and analysis in that interaction that we talked about all throughout. So thank you for engaging in our quiz, our data visualization quiz at the beginning. And we hope that you learned a good amount in today's session and are inspired by the many projects that are there. Which leads me to the final awards. So I mentioned that everyone who presented received the Showcase Award, but we do have a drum roll for the Best Visualization Award. And this year, there are 2 awardees for the Best Visualization Award in the cohort this year. And those awards go to, and this is for the overall data visualization project, that goes to Sandra Wenny-Roth and Marie Elgre's project. And Sandra's project was on property tax. Can African countries benefit from it? And Marie's project was on the role of women in elections in France, looking at 2 elections. In particular, the panel that determined the judges who determined the awards this year reflected on these projects not in terms of just their visual presence, but the fact that they took some very complicated data. If you look at Sandra's project, is using data on financial aspects of housing. It's looking at spatial aspects of housing, and it brought it all together to tell this important story that helps us think about issues surrounding property tax and the future of funding the development for African countries. And so the panel of judges was particularly impressed by Sandra's project. In addition to that, the panel was also highly impressed by Marie's project. In addition to what I mentioned about Sandra, Marie also brought together some very complex and complicated data to produce visualizations that had spatial elements as well as your bar chart, line chart, all the key elements, and turning it all into that beautiful storybook that we interacted with earlier in today's session. And I think what's really lovely about today's showcase is our scholars come from over 20 countries across Africa in this year's cohort as part of the Data Plus Design for Development program. And we're representing amongst our award winners several of those countries amongst our cohort. And in this case, we're representing the Ugandan country and France as well as part of our showcase today. So congratulations to both of you, Sandra and Marie, for a job really, really, really well done. And we'll be sure to send alongside today's recording links to their projects as well. Which leads me to the final things I'd like to say before we say our final thoughts, is that we invite you to get in touch with the Leaders of Africa Institute, because as we mentioned at the beginning, the Data Plus Design for Development program is offered just once a year with one cohort. The applications open in mid to late November, so not too far away. But if you sign up on the interest form, you'll get a special email addressed to you that will say that applications have opened and will invite you to our session for information on the program in advance of you putting in your application so that you're able to get even more information. But obviously, you've seen a lot about how the program works and the quality of the Capstone projects that are accelerated in the Data Plus Design for Development program. We also encourage you to reach out to the Leaders of Africa Institute on LinkedIn and join one of the WhatsApp group to get invites and information as to all the events, both the programs that are opening and opportunities there, but also the open and public events, including this one that the Institute offers on a regular basis. So those links will be shared very shortly in our chat. And with that, I want to pass the microphone back to Henry, one of the co-leads for the Data Plus Design for Development program, to say a few last words to our audience as well as to our scholars as they complete the Data and Design program this year.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So big congratulations to all the scholars, those who were able to present, those that were highlighted, and everybody that successfully completed the program. I know it has been a lot of time and effort that has gone into it, and that is really appreciated. I would also like to encourage you that now whatever that happens here needs to be built upon, And, using from my own experience, I was happy about what I presented during my showcase, but later I got to realize that I've gotten way better with time. So I will encourage you to keep on practicing. If you come across any data within your scope of work, community that you can work on, the skill set you have learned, as you know, applies to different scenarios. Keep on working with various forms of data, using it to tell a story that can lead to greater impact within the society, the continent, and even globally. And to everyone that had the time to join us, we are grateful. And as you have seen, if you're interested in joining the program, you can fill the interest form, and hopefully the next session you will meet to also go through what it takes to clearly build data and use design for development. Yeah, thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Henry. And I'll mention that Henry was actually a presenter at last year's showcase as the data and design winner of last year's showcase, and was promoted to be one of the co-leads this year of this data and design program alongside the main lead, Miss Eva, for the Data Plus Design for Development program. And I think that shows his commitment to continue to further the development of the skills of folks who are trying to tell stories, important stories, with data. So congratulations, Henry, on your first leadership of this program as well. Now, I want to say congratulations again to all the scholars. And as Henry said, the hard work that went into these visualizations, the hard work began with getting the data to be able to do these projects, then shaping the data, working with the data, dealing with the intricacies of data, and then finally translating those into these different platforms that we learned as part of the Data Plus Design from Development program, and then finally making those visualizations really pop, really tell the story we're trying to tell, and make them interactive and pleasing to engage with. And today was just a snapshot of those wonderful projects and the impacts that we can make when we are not just keeping the data to ourselves as researchers or as professionals, but we're thinking about ways in which we creatively communicate with our audiences and bring about the impact that we would like to see. So with that, I want to encourage you to keep in touch with the Leaders of Africa Institute. That is for our alumni and all those who have joined us today. And I want to encourage you to continue to think about ways in which research and data can be used to make an impact, not only in our local communities, but in our countries and in our world overall. And on that message, I want to thank you for attending today's workshop and showcase session for the Data Plus Design for Development program. We look forward to seeing you soon. Take care and bye-bye.